It's Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. A Democrat sweep in yesterday's key elections. A rogue judge is served articles of impeachment. And Brandon Tatum unleashed. Next on the AM Update. It was a wipeout for Republicans in the key races in this off-year election, which went down yesterday. We'll begin in New York City.
I apologize for any family that lost a loved one during that time. It was on my watch.
There is former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo turned New York City independent mayoral candidate. That apology for what he did during the COVID pandemic. Well, that wasn't enough. As New York City made it official last night, they prefer the Islamunist Zoran Mamdani winning the mayor of New York, the nation's largest city. In New Jersey, Democrat Mikey Sherrill won her election against Republican Jack Ciattarelli. And in Virginia,
Adam said to our daughters, "Your mom's going to be the governor of Virginia."
Abigail Spanberger winning her election against Republican Winsome Earl Sears in Virginia. And, of course, the Virginia Attorney General's race, Jay Jones, won last night as well. Jay Jones, the murder fantasist, he wished for the murder of Republicans' children. He won in Virginia. Hundreds of thousands of people voting for Jay Jones. You may be wondering, how could hundreds of thousands of people vote for somebody who wishes death, who wishes murder on Republicans and Republicans' children? Well, the answer is quite simple, because there are hundreds of thousands of people in Virginia who want to do the same thing to you. So just an abject failure for Republicans last night. Now, the losses in and of themselves, not a huge surprise. The polls have been indicating this was going to happen, but the margins that Democrats racked up in basically every race of import, pretty astounding and shocking. I think if you're sitting in Republican leadership right now, one little nugget against the backdrop of all of these results from yesterday's major off-year election results. According to NBC News and an exit poll on young men aged 18 to 29 years old, Democrats won young men 18 to 29 in the Virginia gubernatorial race by 14 points, in the New Jersey gubernatorial race by 10 points, and in the New York City mayoral race by 40 points. Again, that's an NBC News exit poll of young men. So all of this talk about young men skewing more right-wing, and maybe those types just didn't turn out yesterday or at all. There's at least one exit poll showing that maybe that talk is a little bit overblown. Democrats absolutely wiping the floor last night in the off-year elections of import in the country. Well, moving on from yesterday's elections, the White House continues to beat the drums in favor of reopening the government. Here is White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt.
I think the president has been very realistic and strong in his position on the filibuster. He's been very vocal about it. I just spoke to him about it. He feels really strongly about this. Republicans need to play tough and they need to play smart. That's how the president feels. And we know that Democrats, if they are ever given a chance at power again in this city, they will absolutely take away the filibuster from the United States Senate. In fact, you had 49 Democrats who already voted to do this before. The only reason it did not move forward was because you had 2 Democrats who are no longer in office because they were run out of town by the far left radical base of their party. And so President Trump is quite clear on this. He wants to see Republicans move as many good pieces of legislation for our country forward in the next 3 years of his administration as they possibly can.
Now, obviously, the White House is absolutely correct. The Democrats, the next opportunity they have, will absolutely nuke the filibuster. I wonder if Republicans can actually muster their own coalitions along with Democrats to nuke the filibuster now. I have my doubts, but nevertheless, President Trump continues to call for the nuking, the disbandment of the filibuster in order to pass legislation. He called for that again yesterday morning on Truth Social. In addition to making this announcement, he said, quote, SNAP benefits, which increased by billions and billions of dollars, many-fold during crooked Joe Biden's disastrous term in office due to the fact that they were haphazardly handed to anyone asking as opposed to just those in need, which is the purpose of SNAP. Well, he says they'll only be given out when the radical left Democrats open up the government, which they can easily do and not before. So there's President Trump laying down a market for Democrats and those who are dependent on welfare food benefits. Representative Brandon Gill of Texas is formally announcing impeachment articles against U.S. District Judge Judge Boasberg for his role in the Arctic frost probe. Republican allies of President Trump have been, of course, rightfully criticizing Boasberg after news broke he was the judge who signed off on subpoenas and other measures in former special counsel Jack Smith's probe. Gill told media, quote, Chief Judge Boasberg has compromised the impartiality of the judiciary and created a constitutional crisis. He is shamelessly weaponizing his power against his political opponents, including Republican members of Congress. Judge Boasberg was an accomplice in the egregious Arctic frost scandal, where he was equipped by the Biden DOJ to spy on Republican senators. His lack of integrity makes him clearly unfit for the gavel. Gill says, I'm proud to once again introduce articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg to hold him accountable for his high crimes and misdemeanors. Once again, that's all very well and good. Get back to me when anybody is in handcuffs. Obviously, Operation Arctic Frost, or whatever they're calling it, Arctic Frost, under the Biden Department of Justice and Special Counsel Jack Smith, just an egregious abuse of power, and that's putting it very mildly. I want to see somebody in handcuffs. Until then, this is all just bluster. Now, there's this story from The Blaze. In the span of less than 10 minutes after a huge crowd of protesters filled the U.S. Capitol West Plaza beneath the inauguration stage on January 6th of 2021, Capitol Police repeatedly used lethal force on the crowd, targeting people in the head, neck, face, and upper body. Actions one use of force expert called criminally negligent. During that brief span, at least 16 people were shot with kinetic impact projectiles, including 9 who took shots to the top of the head, face, and base of the neck, according to Capitol Police surveillance video obtained by Blaze News. The rounds are designed to be shot at or below the waist or skipped off of pavement to strike the legs and cause trauma and pain compliance. None of the rounds observable on the surveillance footage struck below the belt, putting all of the observable rounds in dangerous and potentially lethal territory. The targeting of the crowd and one graphic bloody injury to a protester's face enraged the crowd and appeared to lead to a large escalation of violence towards police, including the throwing of water bottles and flagpoles and the use of pepper spray and bear repellent. Deputy Capitol Police Chief Eric Waldo claimed that the U.S. Capitol Police radio dispatch about 1:11 p.m. that afternoon that his officers were using indirect firing, but the department's surveillance video contradicts that claim. So that is part of an exclusive story. You can read the full thing over at The Blaze and Blaze News. Capitol Police using what should be less lethal rounds used in a particular way in order to thwart the speed of those projectiles, either skipped off of pavements or fired at or below the waist. They were firing towards the head and neck area of protesters on January 6th, according to this report. Again, just another shrimp on the Barbie of that ridiculous day. Yes, there was some violence. No, was that a bad thing? Obviously. But it seems like, once again, this is just the latest prima facie evidence. This was all going according to somebody's plan. When we come back, California is in trouble for redistricting. Well, that's according to President Trump. Also, a portrait of what the Democrats will do if they regain power in the elections to come. One actress, not the smartest person in the world, but smarter than the guy we talked about yesterday. That's coming up next. Well, yesterday I claimed George Clooney, acclaimed actor, is one of the dumbest people on the face of the planet. I'm not saying that this woman is necessarily the smartest person on the planet, but maybe a little bit more self-aware than that other actor.
You have been politically outspoken in the past. Mm-hmm. In the first Trump administration, you had a lot to say. I'm curious how you feel about talking out now.
I don't really know if I should. I think the first Trump administration was so wild. And just how can we let this stand? Like, I felt like I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. But as we've learned, election after election, celebrities do not make a difference whatsoever on who people vote for.
There is actress Jennifer Lawrence speaking to the New York Times about why she's no longer, quote unquote, speaking out against President Trump in Trump's second term, saying that actors and actresses, celebrities don't really have that much of an influence. That's not true. They do. If nothing else than a reinforcing principle for one side of the culture. At least, though, at the very least, I can say this about J-Law. She's got a lot more self-awareness than George Clooney. Well, if you want a picture, a portrait of what the Democrats intend to do should they ever wrest full power in the federal government away from, the rest of the country, look no further than former Attorney General Eric Holder speaking to Midas Touch recently.
No, the point that you make there is an extremely important one. The courts have generally held. If you look at what's happening at the district court level, at the Court of Appeals level, doesn't matter who the president was who appointed the judge. The judges have ruled, I think, courageously and correctly. It's only when you get to the Supreme Court that you see these problems start to arise, and it's the use of this overuse of the shadow docket. By taking these cases and essentially deciding them without hearing any oral argument, without any adequate briefing, deciding these really important matters in that way challenges the legitimacy of the court and does an untold amount of damage to the legal fabric of this nation. I think, the reality is, and it pains me to say this, I think the Supreme Court is a broken institution. And it's something that has to be, I think, a part of the national conversation in 26 and in 28. What are we going to do about the Supreme Court? And I think that we have to think about, again, talking about the acquisition and the use of power. If there is a Democratic trifecta in 2028, and I think the possibility of that is pretty good, Supreme Court reform is something that has to be considered. Term limits, I think, at a minimum, potentially expanding the court is something I think that also should be considered. We cannot leave in place without a discussion, at least, and I think without substantive reforms being put in place, this Supreme Court as it is presently constituted.
So there is former Attorney General Eric Holder just spelling out in no uncertain terms what Democrats intend to do if they ever have a trifecta in the United States federal government again. Again, that is the strongest argument in favor of what President Trump has been beating the drum on for the past few days, nuking the filibuster. I'm not totally sure if they were able to nuke the filibuster. I'm not totally sure if they have an agenda in place, bills ready to go right away, that would just pass right out of the House and the Senate and be enacted into law. For instance, let's say the federal government, let's say Congress passes a law after nuking the filibuster that every state must prove beyond shadow of a doubt that they are making every effort to make sure or are actually requiring proof of citizenship to vote in any election. Are we absolutely sure there are enough Republican votes in the Senate to get that done? Because I'm not quite so sure. Nevertheless, which is my crutch word recently, nevertheless, what President Trump is saying was just borne out. These people are going to nuke the filibuster anyway, so might as well take our chances. So this is new from President Trump as well. In a Truth Social post, he wrote yesterday, the unconstitutional redistricting vote in California is a giant scam in that the entire process, in particular the voting itself, is rigged. All mail-in ballots where the Republicans in that state are shut out is under very serious legal and criminal review. Stay tuned. So there's President Trump coming out and warning Governor Gavin Newsom and his Prop 50, which is going to be on the ballot regarding redistricting in that state, saying that it is under criminal review. We'll see what that means in the future. And now here's this. Brandon Tatum, I was not aware of your game. Here he is sitting down with Konstantin Kaysen. First or second time I've mentioned that name in recent days on this here podcast, on the Triggernometry podcast, I should say, talking about the conspiracy theories in the aftermath of the martyring of Charlie Kirk. Listen to this.
It is the amount of conspiracies around Charlie Kirk's death is literally one of the craziest things I ever experienced. Like, you know, I've always been I have never been a part of a conspiracy, meaning that this situation happened to this person I don't know. I don't know nothing about the situation. I'm just watching on TV like everybody else. And then there's conspiracies. And then you may buy into the conspiracies. No, I'm a part of this conspiracy. Like, I knew Charlie. I know the security team. I know everybody that work at Turning Point USA. I know the video team. I know Erica. You know, my wife and Erica text. Like, we know all of these people. I worked for Turning Point since 2017. I was the only person the last 2 years doing campus tours like Charlie was. He would do his tours, I do my tours. Like, so in the same video team, a lot of them guys would work with me. The same security team protects Charlie for, 10 years now. And so when I see people saying stuff, it's like, it's levels to it, right? I know some people are ignorant, they don't know nothing about nothing, they just like to post. But then it goes to the point where there are people that know the same people I know and say things that are incendiary, and it makes my blood boil. Like, I feel like I'm getting worked up now just thinking about it, because it's so egregious what's happening to those young people that work for Turning Point. The video team that they're saying took a SD card. Mike Turek, who he was doing a hat adjustment. I know that guy. Frank Turek is a great guy. He's a Christian guy. He's one of the biggest Christian apologists that go on campus every day. He was Charlie's good friend. I was just at an event before this, like a year before that, riding in the car with him. You know, he's a mentor. He's a great man. And then people on TV saying he doing hand signals. His security team, these guys are all professional individuals that protect Charlie with their life for several years, everywhere he goes. And you think they're doing a hand signal. And so it's very sad to see some people are taking advantage of the moment, which means that it's a lot of money in conspiracies now that I found out. But also there's people who have another motive, and it's rooted in anti-Semitism, which makes everything that happens go down the path to lead to Jew Street. Meaning that everything that they do have to lead to the Jews, which will make people go up and beyond to outrageous lengths, beyond conspiracy, to make this person responsible or this group of people responsible. So those are kind of like the two phases and dynamics that I see in this whole Charlie Kirk thing, and Israel in some cases.
So there is Brandon Tatum, speaker, influencer. I was not familiar with your games, sir. But listening to him speak was catharsis, and here's why. It seems like when you approach followings of 600,000 or 700,000 followers on social media, and Brandon Tatum has close to 1 million, but it seems like over the past 7-8 weeks, when you approach those numbers of followers, it seems like you're taking crazy pills. It seems like the more followers you have, the more crazy the takes become, the more conspiratorial the takes become, particularly when it comes to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so this is from someone who knows or knew Kirk well, knew those surrounding Kirk who were there with him when that event happened. And Brandon Tatum just saying, this is absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. I appreciate this is not the first time Brandon Tatum I've seen in recent weeks speaking out against these just wicked and awful and just brain dead takes. I appreciate him doing so nonetheless. Now, speaking of taking crazy pills, there's another podcast appearance we need to talk about. That's coming up next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary, on the topic of taking crazy pills. The more followers you have, the crazier you tend to be, at least when it comes to right-wing America. Credit to Tucker Carlson. He joined the Dave Smith podcast the other day, and he did say that he has at least one regret regarding his podcast episode with Nick Fuentes.
But I just want to say at the outset, because this has been weighing on me, I did say something that I really regret saying that I didn't fully mean. I said it because I was mad, which is always when I say things I don't really mean. When I get pissed, my wife's always telling me this. I was snippy and I didn't explain it. And I said something to the effect of, I despise Christian Zionists. And I'm just sorry that I said that, because I don't. I'm mad at a certain kind of thinking. Some of the nicest people I know are Christian Zionists, actually. You know, if you're in a car crash, they would save you. If you need someone to watch your bank account, they wouldn't steal from you. They're like really good people and sweet people.
So there's Tucker Carlson apologizing for saying that he basically hates Christian Zionists, has a great deal of contempt for Christian Zionists. And he made that comment in no uncertain terms once again. Went out of his way to say that during his appearance with Dave Smith on his podcast. So there is some credit to Tucker Carlson. I said the other day, I'm not sure. I didn't close the door on this like I did with the Heritage Foundation, but I'm not sure that any sort of movement can just afford to jettison somebody who has done a lot of really good work in the past, who has a massive platform and audience, over one misjudgment. I'm not sure that we can just jettison that figure. I'm sure we can't do the same type of thing with the Heritage Foundation. We can't throw the entire organization under the bus, like some are trying to do with an all-or-nothing approach. That's a step in the right direction for Tucker Carlson, because the best thing you can say is that he used very bad judgment or was just plain ignorant of what he was doing, what the impact would be, what the effect would be of featuring Nick Fuentes on his program. Now, the flip side of this as well is that the clip that I just started to play for you goes on for another 90 seconds. And the first 30 seconds that I played for you, I understand what he's talking about. A certain way of thinking when it comes to Zionism. Kind of the boomer era dispensationalism. You've kind of heard that buzz term thrown around, where there are people who spend more time thinking about the red heifer, the Temple Mount Fund, the inner workings of the Israel body politic than they do about their own local body politic, their own local school board or city council. That type of archetype is rife within the previous generation, unfortunately. So I share that frustration. I would never express it or think to express it in the way that he expressed it with Nick Fuentes the other day, but I do appreciate the contrition nonetheless from Tucker Carlson. But the rest of this clip, he goes into more detail, he says, about what he's actually concerned about, what he's frustrated about with Christian Zionism. And he goes on to say he had conversations with Christian leaders like the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, regarding the, officially it's an errant strike on a Christian church. Do we know it's actually a Christian church in so-called Gaza? And said it killed people, and Israel never apologized. That's just not true. Israel apologized in less than 24 hours. They said it was a mistake in less than 24 hours. So again, just a weird... the reason why I'm so reticent to throw Tucker Carlson completely under the bus, he is on thin ice, I would say, in a lot of people's minds. And if they haven't already thrown him under the bus, and I'm not going to necessarily chastise people for doing so, particularly if you're a Jew. But I just don't know what his end game is here. If he hadn't done so much work, so much good work in the past, I would just come to some very dark conclusions about what's going on. But nevertheless, again, for the third time today, that is my crutch word. I need to work on that. Regardless, that is a step in the right direction that Tucker Carlson did show some contrition for calling vast swaths of the country on his own side on 90%, 95% of issues, saying he despises them. It's a step in the right direction for Tucker Carlson to show that level of, whoops, I screwed up. I think that's a good thing. That's going to do it for a Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.